Story 1. I once knew a young lad named Trevor, a young man who I regret not knowing better. Trevor, which is very much not his real name, was a more realistic version of what would happen to a good Will Hunting-type personality if he was raised in the rural Midwest. For those who don't know, the culture of Midwestern USA is not defined by football, wheat fields, or people chanting USA. It's defined by boredom, and all the crazy crap people do with that boredom. See, the thing about Trevor was that he is insanely smart, though very much on the spectrum, and loved to develop skills that were honestly useless in 90% of the real world. Let's be real, as much as they make for an awesome YouTube videos or TikToks. Outside of burglars and secret agents, the ability to pick a lock in 6 seconds flat, parker up walls, or know how to determine a security camera's eye line are not really skills that have much value in most 9-5 settings. But Trevor had those skills. He had learned them from the early days of YouTube, from a 4chan still owned by Moot, from Something Awful, and God knows what other sites existed at the time that a person like myself have never heard of. He was also a Midwesterner, which meant he had the time, space, and boredom needed to get good at them. Now, the thing about Trevor is that he went to a school that seemed to still be stuck between the satanic panic of the late 80s and the drug wars of the 90s. They didn't just have all those silly rules on the books, such as no gangs of 5 or more can congregate, they actually enforced them. This led to poor Trevor, an avid hoodie fan, an odd loner who never could quite get a handle on social things, to be an easy target for the administration. Trevor, being a child of the internet, really did try to do things the right way when it came to defying the absurd or unrealistic demands from the administration. When there was an unfair rule regarding shorts, he tried to wear a kilt, but not having the charisma needed to rally other students, he just made a target of himself, and the school just added another draconian rule to the books. Now, I'll never know where Trevor got his idea for revenge on the school, though I would not be shocked if it was from a very particular episode of Malcolm in the Middle, but apparently after enough failed attempts to stand up to the administration, only to end up with just another draconian rule on the book, something clicked for Trevor. See, as mentioned, this administration was stuck in the past. Somehow, back in the day, a bunch of rural idiots got it in their heads that all their pasty white preteens were all just one NWA album away from becoming hardened gangbangers, one Anne Rice novel out from sacrificing their school chums to the devil, one puff of weed away from becoming crack addicts, etc. So, Trevor, with no heroes to turn to, decided to become the villain. And thus began Trevor's long campaign to make the school as unbearable for everyone else as it was for him. He began small, little things scattered around the school. Rolled paper with odd-smelling contents scattered behind the gym. A bit of graffiti of some ominous-looking symbol on the corner of a utility shed, etc. He mostly also did these things at night, which, if anyone has ever lived out in the boonies knows, nighttime can get darker than if someone just blindfolded you. His main reason for this was to avoid getting caught with any of his little props during the day, now that the school had suddenly implemented a bag search policy. With each little prop he left behind, so did the administration tighten their grip around the student body. Graffiti, I really use the term lightly. It was mostly just swears, written on walls and bathrooms in marker and pencils. Sorry, no more outside writing implements. You had to take an assigned no. 2 pencil from the newly implemented communal class supplies and return it at the end of class. No use of gym lockers or showers without a teacher present, which, for various reasons, led to a large number of sweaty teens as most teachers, understandable, weren't volunteering their time to chaperone underage children showering, and the gym teacher could not exist in multiple points in space at the same time. Computer room laptop screensavers turned to inappropriate anime topics. That one was a twofer, getting both an entirely unmanageable permission system put in place, limiting computer access outside of class, as well as a general ban on anime, which naturally was very inconsistently enforced. Red-colored shoes with a black star and Sharpie on them. Red accessories are now banned, such as bandanas, shoes, scarves, etc. I think Trevor was more going for a Red Scare angle on this one, but turned into a gangland thing instead. This went on for quite some time, and so people's resentment built slowly, but surely. I'd like to say that the stick that broke the camel's back was one of the many new dress code restrictions that were unfairly put against the girls, which if the administration had gone on would probably end up looking like nuns. But this is the Midwest after all. The real camel break was the banning of school phones from property. See, they were already banned from classrooms, but most people put them in their locker. What pushed the administration to ban them outright was the discovery of discarded burner phones. In reality, Trevor had managed to get his hands on a bunch of very obsolete flip phones, none of them the same year or even brand, but all the right type of shabby to look like something from a cartel movie. He programmed some ominously vague-looking contacts into the phones, specifically one of them being the meat packer, and all of them leading to dead numbers. He then made sure to throw them away in optimally incriminating-looking spots. If anything, the fact that all the phones were incapable of making outgoing calls anymore almost seemed to add to the paranoia factor. On its own, maybe even this rule would have been tolerated. This was the place where good old-fashioned values still rang true, and where people believed that kids should be spending less time with their nose in a screen and more time experiencing the grand virtues of the real world. You know, all those empty fields, an economically downturned Main Street, which was really just a strip mall, and abandoned garbage dumps. The thing is, the school had a very strict trespassing policy, one that actually predated Trevor's little campaign. There were exemptions, but not every student was on the swim team, so most kids had to kindly get themselves off of property in an orderly manner. Here's the thing though, this was not the 80s, this was not the 90s. Parents had no interest in having to come on time to pick up their kids every day. They liked being able to text at the last minute and tell their kids to walk down the road and take the bus, or go home with a friend. This was one of those weirdly sprawling rural culture, so school buses wouldn't and couldn't cover every house. Yes, I know they're legally obligated, but let's not kid ourselves. Small towns are their own sort of crazy, and the idea that every parent in the student body had to now be punctual just wasn't all that feasible. Some families had both parents still working. A lot of parents were also salaried and could be asked or strong-armed into staying later. Hell, some parents just worked because they didn't want to go home. This started a chain of events that led to people asking the question, how come things have gotten so bad under this administration? See, the irony of all these draconian rules is that it made it seem like the school was in the midst of an epidemic. This school had been fine for years, but clearly something had changed, and the current administration couldn't handle it. It wasn't an overnight process by any means, but within a decent stretch of time, most of the higher-ups in the administration were systematically replaced. Then, wouldn't you just know it, all these big problems they were having seemed to suddenly clear up. No more graffiti, still plenty of pot smoking, no more gang paraphernalia, and no more for a lot more. The new administration was much more reasonable. That is to say, they stopped reporting and enforcing issues that might make them look bad, and instead looked the other way whenever they could. Even anime eventually made a comeback. Thus life went back to normal. As for Trevor, I'd like to say his story ended with him becoming a captain of industry, or paraded on people's shoulders through town square. Story 2. I've been holding on to this story for a while and feel like it's time to finally share it. It all began when my partner and I moved into what we thought was our dream house a little over 2 years ago. We were thrilled to start this new chapter of our lives, but we had no idea what kind of neighbors we were about to meet. It started on our moving day. Our attached neighbors were an elderly woman in her 60s and her grandson, a young man in his late teens. We thought it would be nice to introduce ourselves, hoping to create a friendly connection. However, it soon became clear that they had some rather unusual expectations. The elderly woman mentioned that the previous owners often baked her treats, subtly suggesting that we should do the same. It seemed she expected to be treated like royalty. The grandson, meanwhile, introduced himself by saying he was the worst person in town. Not exactly the warmest welcome. After that, we decided to keep a friendly but distant relationship. However, things escalated quickly. Within a week of moving in, our neighbors started having late-night arguments, blasting music at all hours, and even banging on the walls. It got so disruptive that the police began visiting frequently due to the elderly woman's constant complaints about disputes with her grandson. Despite the chaos, my partner and I were determined to enjoy our new home. We put in time and effort to fix up the house, making it beautiful and adding value. Being in our mid-20s, we felt we could handle the neighborhood drama. Then, last month, things took a terrifying turn. One evening, as night fell, we heard what sounded like gunshots coming from our backyard. Since we live in a downtown suburb, this was completely unexpected. Thankfully, we had installed security cameras, so we decided to check the footage. What we saw and heard left us stunned. The grandson and his friends were in their yard, discussing shooting another round, and laughing about how they just say it was fireworks. They even mentioned the caliber of the rounds. Although it was too dark to see them firing, our cameras picked up the sound of 9 gunshots. Concerned for our safety, we called the police. By the time the police arrived, the kids had left, and there was no evidence of anyone with a firearm. It was frustrating, but we had no choice but to let it go and hope it wouldn't happen again. But our nightmare with the neighbors wasn't over. At the beginning of August, the elderly woman invited her daughter, son-in-law, and their children to move in with them. This decision only increased the mayhem. The shouting and yelling intensified, and now crying children were part of the mix. I considered calling Child Protective Services, but I was worried about the impact on the innocent children. To escape the stress, my partner and I took a road trip to visit family and explore some interesting places at the end of August. We kept an eye on our property through our cameras whenever we had cell service. Then, we received a call from our unattached neighbor, who informed us that our attached neighbors were building an unsightly shed using random planks of wood. At first, we tried not to worry too much, as their unattractive shed didn't directly impact us, aside from being an eyesore. We continued our trip, checking our cameras occasionally to make sure they weren't trespassing or causing any damage to our property. We returned home just a few hours ago, still feeling relaxed from our trip. But as soon as we arrived, we were shocked. Our attached neighbors had crossed a major line. They had dug out and stolen a section of our fence, a metal post, and part of our chain-link fence to create a back fence and gate for their yard. This left large holes in our back parking area, posing a serious hazard. As my partner stepped out of the car, he nearly tripped into one of the holes. They had also improperly attached their makeshift fence to ours, leaving it crooked and damaged. Unfortunately, our cameras didn't catch them in the act. One moment, the fence was intact, and in the next frame, the section was gone. We were stunned and infuriated. We knew we needed to take action, but were mindful of the potential dangers, given our neighbors' volatile nature. Sharing a wall with them and lacking a firewall between our properties, we wanted to avoid provoking them further. So, we began planning the safest way to report their actions. The next day, we contacted our borough's authorities to report the theft and property damage. We decided to press charges, but were cautious in our approach, emphasizing our need for anonymity for safety reasons. We knew we were dealing with unpredictable neighbors and couldn't afford to take any risks. Finally, we reported them to the local authorities for stealing our fence and damaging our property. We also provided evidence of all the disturbances they had caused: the loud arguments, the gunshot sounds, and confrontations. The police assured us they would investigate. One evening, the police were called to our neighbor's house due to another noise complaint. This time, a different neighbor had reported them, finally fed up with the ongoing disruptions. Our neighbors lost control and began yelling and arguing with the officers. The situation escalated, and the police had to arrest them. The elderly woman, her grandson, and a few others were taken into custody. They faced charges including assaulting officers and resisting arrest. We watched this unfold from our home, and it felt like a weight had been lifted off our shoulders. The dark cloud that had been hovering over us finally disappeared. Story 3. As we found out that we'd be expecting, Not one but two kids. We knew we had to move to a real house with more space. At the time we were still living in a one-bedroom studio one up from the ground floor, with its only entrance being a metal fire escape stairs. Not ideal for a pregnant woman, let alone to live with two small babies. So, we found a privately leased house that was newly renovated and had all the room and a large garden we were looking for. We signed the lease and immediately collected the keys. As the owner drove off, the woman next door came up to me, immediately demanding we not make noise before noon as her BF works nights and sleeps in and a whole bunch of other do's and don'ts. So right off the bat I knew, trouble incoming. As the house was fully renovated and not much had to be done, we were like, don't poke the bear, we'll do the things that make noise after noon. We moved in after 2 weeks and the whole street was warm and welcoming. My wife almost died giving birth to my twin daughters, so some people offered help with anything we needed, real kind people. They also told us about our neighbors. Nobody liked them. He was a big bully and got into arguments with everybody. Also were known as radio pirates in illegal broadcasting on radio with all Dutch bangers. This music is just terror on your ears and possibly used on terrorists on black sites, which went alongside them partying Thursday, Sunday till 5 in the morning. Loud music, constant yelling, always drunken, etc. Really something to look forward to when moving in, certainly with 2 babies on the way. The partying began immediately, full blast. Real classy for someone demanding to be quiet when douchebag needs his beauty sleep. Then one day my Phil came to put new grass in. He has his trailer parked at the back of our houses, which is a public space. Not according to him though. Not that exact spot where the trailer was parked was his spot, and we had to move the trailer. It was full with grass sods, quite heavy stuff. Not going to happen as I was not planning to walk all the way around the house with the sods. He got angry right away and demanded that I move it. I told him to get lost. I was done with him already then and there. I'm also a ginger, so besides having no soul, I do have a temper which is always in check until you provoke me repeatedly. Anyone who knows me will tell you that you really had to make an effort for that to happen. We went on working, and the end of the day comes when my Phil wants to leave. Hooks up the trailer and bam, there was douchebag, telling him off, yelling it's his spot, and he better not do this again or else. Mess with me all you want, I can handle it. But what you don't do is threaten my family. I ran outside and told him in no uncertain terms to back off, or he'll be the sorry one. Total bluff on my side. Yes, I have that temper, but I'm not impressively built and have no hidden fighting skills. I do fight dirty. He backs off. Phil leaves and I go inside where I find my wife crying. She got scared of him maybe doing something to her father and or me, and this is something we don't need right now. Combined with hormones from being pregnant, and you can paint that picture. So I'm even more mad, but had to promise not to act on anything. I won't, dear, not yet anyway. Time went on without any real incident, and then came the time my wife went into labor. Didn't go smoothly and ended up having to deliver with C-section or whatever it's called because daughter 2 was almost strangled by the umbilical cord. We had to stay 3 nights, excruciating nights due to a lot of things. Finally, we gotta go home. The family had put a giant sign in our front yard welcoming the babies. The sign was already up for a few days prior to coming home, so our friendly neighbors definitely knew about it. But did they care? No, they did not. From the first night on they started to party and broad-blasted their terror music. They started at noon and continued to until 5 or 6 in the morning. Classy. They also kept going for days, so it wasn't just Thursday, Sunday, it was all week long and the next. So we were broken, hardly slept. One of our daughters suffered from heavy cramps combined with all the noise and her parents at the end of their wits, so she cried a lot. And then I just had it. I researched some things on radio pirates, the laws and regulations, and on his large 5 MTR plus antenna in his backyard, which was illegal in itself, but he used it to illegally broadcast on radio, which meant he had a lot of equipment to do so, which was even more illegal and can even get you jailed. But at the very least they could seize it all and fine him big time. In the 1045K area. Now, I did not immediately turn him in, but instead were looking for another house to lease first. This is because I figured it wouldn't sit well with him, and having a wife and 2 babies in the house alone during the day because I had to go to work. I hear you guys thinking, why not involve the police? Well, they are utterly useless in cases like this. We called once, and what they did disturbs me to this day. They rang at their doorbell and immediately started off by saying we called them about noise complaints. Yes, you read that right. No protection or whatsoever. Just blatantly told them we were the reason they're there. Told them to keep it down, and that was it. They didn't even follow up with us or anything. As you can guess, douchebag now was even more pissed and told me the next day, or yelled over the fence that separates our backyards, that I really should not do that again. A threat yet again, of which I told the police. I didn't report it the first time, as I chalked that up to alpha male and heat of the moment. But without witnesses to corroborate, nothing could be done yet again. Some days later I walked out the front door, and he just stepped out of his car. Came up to me demanding I cut back some of our ivy that grew on our side of the fence because it tangled in with his big antenna. He would be gone for some hours, and I could come into his garden to cut back the ivy that grew through on their side. And then a light bulb went on above my head. I told him politely that I would do that immediately. Why? Because that gave me the opportunity to find out the make and model of this antenna, to ascertain its signal strength, where the cables go exactly, and what kind of cables they were, again to know the signal strength it handled. Also, it gave me a good view of the equipment he had, through the window, so I could snap some photographs of it. This was the icing on the cake, because in the meantime we did manage to find a new home and already had signed the lease, so we would be gone in 2 weeks. Luckily, we only had to paint some walls for the girls' room and furthermore just pack up our things and move them to the other house. So after I trimmed the ivy and collected my evidence, I went online that night to find out the proper channels to report a broadcast pirate and which entity was tasked with catching said pirate. Turned out I had to call the telecom agency, but also the police. Wasn't too happy with the latter, but I remembered I have a nephew that works for the police. Officially his area was immigration, but knew enough colleagues that could help us, and we could trust not to confront them again saying I was the one that sent them. That was extremely important for our safety when doing what I was doing. So I gave both the agency and the police all evidence I collected, and pointed them to the frequencies he pirated so they could listen in. Then they started a neighborhood investigation, which wasn't really necessary, but this was to cover ourselves to make it look like he got caught by accident, because they had an active investigation in our area. You never know what he can learn from legal documents and such. We asked them to wait with the raid eyes they raid pirates' houses, preferably in the early hours of the day because of his beauty sleep rendering him incapable of fleeing or hide evidence, etc. We moved 2 weeks later, and they raided him 2 days after we moved. All of his equipment, computers, radios, cell phones, and his car were seized. He left in cuffs. His wife did too, for making a big scene and tried to interfere. All of which was live reported to me by one of my ex-neighbors who were equally ecstatic about this. It turned out, this wasn't the first time he got caught, but his 3rd time. His car had no insurance on it, and his mot failed. This would normally have no big consequence because he didn't drive it while raided. But they had the guy surveilled on for a week, and that definitely meant he was seen driving it while not having insurance and valid mot. He was fined somewhere around 30k euros, went to jail for 12 weeks, and everything seized was destroyed except the car. His GF had to do 40-some hours community service. They had to sell the house, which made for very happy neighbors, as they too were over and done with them. Like I said, I do fight, but very dirty. You have to really make an effort for me to get to that point. They did and suffered. Over a year later, when shopping for groceries, I encountered them. With the foulest of looks. If looks could kill, I'd be a smoldering heap of ash. But nothing more than that. Story 4. My husband Bill and I had been doing pretty well. I am just nearing the 8th month mark on my pregnancy, and I am excited to report that I am having another boy. Bill is overjoyed, my son is happy to be getting a brother, and my in-laws are over the moon. We got a dog and a bird, and I love them as much as I love my son and future son. As much as I would love to report that all lived happily ever after, I wouldn't be here posting if that were the case. I have posted before that my best friend Barbara has been an angel from heaven, but during the last 2 months, things have begun to change. Barbara and Dave were constantly fighting, and I was always being pulled into the middle of it. I asked my husband to replace me in the middle of these arguments because I physically and emotionally couldn't deal. My hormones just wouldn't allow it. When Bill would come home after dealing with the fallout of whatever fight they were having that day, it always ended with Barbara being the one in the wrong. Barbara quit her job that I helped her to get and decided she didn't want to work anymore. She had been speaking with Karen again, and Karen told her that women shouldn't be working. I glossed over Karen's views in the past, but this crazy woman is living in the year 1950, where a woman's place is in the home, taking care of the kids, cleaning and cooking. She is highly religious, using God as her justification to be a bad human being, and she is super conservative and deep in the fog on conspiracy theories. She believes in Q, watches the news every single day. She is the living embodiment of the Karen stereotype. On one of the evenings, Bill was mediating between Barbara and Dave. I got a phone call from him. He said he didn't think he could do this anymore because Barbara tried to throw herself at him when Dave walked out on her. Barbara was screaming in the background, and having remembered my husband's transgressions before I told him to come home immediately. When he got home, he told me as he was walking out, Barbara was promising him the world if he would leave me and be with her. That her mother said they would be perfect together and me and Dave were leeches on the both of them. She could give him the children he deserves and not some rat in the gutter that I was giving him. Yes, she said this about an unborn child. Needless to say, I was pissed. I called Barbara and asked her what the hell. She hung up on me without even answering. Minutes later, I get a call from Karen. She tells me that under no uncertain terms am I to get in between her and her daughter's happiness, that I should throw myself down a flight of stairs, take both my kids with me, and do my husband a favor, and let him be with a real woman. Unable to cope with hearing her tell me to kill both of my kids and myself, I threw the phone at the wall and shattered it. After the ordeal with my mother and all of the therapy I had been going to, also counting I am super hormonal, my spine is stronger than ever, and I told my husband that if he speaks to that home-wrecking witch or her mother again, then it was over for good. I also sprinkled in a threat to tear off his private parts and feed them to the dog. Of course, I do not advocate for violence, but I was that mad and hormones are a witch. I went to our bedroom and let all of the hormonal rage into my pillow. I cried for hours, in disbelief that my best friend would prove to be just as manipulative as her mother. When Dave discovered what had occurred because Karen bragged to him that Bill and Barbara were getting together, he came to my house straight away to fight my husband. Bill set him straight, and we decided then and there that Barbara was now out of our lives. Dave is finished with Barbara's entitled nonsense, her behavior mirroring that of her mother, and all of the lies and the attempt to seduce his best friend, her best friend's husband. He filed for divorce a few days later. He moved some things into our guest room and has been living with us for the last month. She has tried coming here to my house to beg Dave to take her back, but he is done with her. When she saw she wasn't getting anywhere with Dave, she tried getting my husband to talk to her, pounding on the door and shouting for him to come outside. He went outside, leaving the door open, and tried telling her to leave. Right there in front of me, she turned on the waterworks. She was telling him everything she thought he wanted to hear. That she could be good for him, that she could give him healthy children, that I was worthless as a mother and wife, etc. It was the most pathetic thing I had ever seen. She tried hugging him, and he put out his arms to stop her. She began shrieking that he was assaulting her and threatened to call the police. I decided that was a fantastic idea and called them myself. I told the police my crazy ex-friend was harassing me and my husband and needed them to come take her away. Barbara was shouting at me that I was trash and a lot of other choice words, repeating Karen's words for me and my kids to die. I texted Karen and told her that she can have her trashy daughter back, but she is to leave me, my husband, Dave, and my children alone. She texted back that she will ruin my life for ruining her daughter's life. I told her that Barbara ruined her own damn life by listening to her and trying to get intimate with my husband. I also mentioned that text messages cannot be deleted once they are sent, so I will be forwarding this to my attorney. She never responded. Gotcha. Which? The police arrived and Barbara was escorted off the property. Bill didn't want to press charges, telling Barbara to never come back and to go home back to our old state. She made her bed, and it was now time to lie in it. Because she and Dave didn't have a prenup, she wants to take everything from him. She now lives in the house, not paying any of her share of the utilities or mortgage. She is holding their pets hostage and even had the locks changed so Dave couldn't even get in if he wanted to. Karen is now down here, living in the house as well. I know because I kept getting sent pictures of her and Barbara together by Barbara as a means of throwing it in my face. I ended up blocking her after telling her to go shove her gross, incestuous relationship down someone else's throat. I kinda regret that one, but it felt good to say it at the time. Dave has contacted his family and an attorney. His grandparents offered $300,000 to Barbara and Karen, so they will leave and sign over Barbara's share of the house. She can keep her car and the pets and all of her personal belongings, but the house and his car is all he wants. The attorney has yet to hear back from them, but I suspect they are dragging this out just to punish Dave. He is now living with us and has been deeply depressed to the point he has suggested killing himself just to escape the pain. He and Barbara were together for many years before they got married, and he feels betrayed and taken advantage of. He knows he has us to lean on for support, and we will always be there for him, but I know he needs more than that. I suggested therapy, because he knows therapy has done me wonders. He's considering it. I'm truly heartbroken that the one friend I had trusted did this to appease the mother that abandoned her for so many years. I know my pain is nowhere near Dave's pain, but I still feel betrayed and used. I stopped giving people second chances and Barbara will never get another chance. I'm happy to say that I am doing okay emotionally despite everything that's happened. No thanks to these crazy hormones. Update. We are in the process of getting a no-contact order against her and her mother Karen so they leave us alone. So far, Karen's harassment has been minor and nothing worth noting. Karen drives by my house several times a day to spy on us and has shown up at restaurants we are eating at and will sit near us and glare at us. We just ignore her and go about our business like she's not even there, even though I do sneakily record her on my phone and she's on the Ring camera. I am crazy about keeping a record of everything. So far, Barbara has been radio silent since the last time she showed up to my house. Dave has been working a lot to try keeping his mind off of the current situation. Bill and I have begun talking about moving, but we can't really bring ourselves to move again. We put so much money into this house, and it is becoming our sanctuary, and we don't want to be chased out of here. My son loves his room and our nursery is finished in preparation for when I have my second child. We are currently remodeling 2 bathrooms and the kitchen. I love my house, so moving is not an option right now. The last 24 hours, we began getting some strange calls from people asking to set up appointments to come look at the house as they were interested in possibly purchasing it. We told them we aren't selling the house and to not call back. They were even calling last night while we were sleeping. The last person to call here, we asked them where they heard our house was up for sale. They directed us to Craigslist where there was an ad for my house. The ad was almost too good to be fake, with pictures of the front of my house, my backyard and interior pictures from some other house. The ad was listing the house for $1. Insulting, as we put nearly $200K into the house when buying it and another $45K just in remodeling that is still ongoing. My husband's business number was posted in the ad. We were able to get the post taken down, but the damage was done, so now we are having to tell everyone calling that the ad was fake and we are not selling the house. Most have been understanding, but a few were angry. It's obvious to me and Bill that Karen is the one who posted the ad, as she keeps driving by our house. The backyard picture in the ad was stolen off of my Facebook. I don't know what house the interior pictures belong to, but they do not belong to mine. You can clearly see a backyard in one of the photos, and it doesn't even match my backyard. We made a report with the police. We're going to keep documenting everything until we take Karen to court. Edit. I forgot to mention the fake Tinder profile in my haste to post this. I've been contacted by a few men on Facebook claiming to have come across my profile from Tinder. I'm ignoring it for now. I'm sure this is just Karen trying to cause an issue between me and Bill, but Bill knows I would never make a dating app profile.